Good morning, afternoon, evening, nighttime, whatever time it may be that you're watching this. We're back at it, Monday morning, 6 a.m. But I'll be talking about Friday, week 7, day 5. Pardon me. We started off bright and early, 9 a.m., ensemble singing. Shout out Sandridge. So we did a warm-up. 6 people were given 3 notes in a harmony, so 2 on each note, and then they went about and gave people that note, and as we walked around until the whole class was singing in harmony, which was cool. And I was one of the first 6 people, so that was neat. Then we did a little warm-up of a round on 3 parts, and I don't remember what it was, and I didn't write it down. Trying to stay focused and be present in what it is that we're doing. Then we received a new song. Ba-da-ba-ba-da-ba. You're Just in Love by Irving Berlin. And we talked about the Great American Songbook and how there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, I believe, composers in the Great American Songbook. And it's kind of known as the jazz standards. But there's Irving Berlin, Cole Porter, George Gershwin, Richard Rodgers, Jermaine Kern, and Harold Arlen. Harold Arlen wrote The Wizard of Oz. And everyone knows The Wizard of Oz, but they don't all know him. So, yeah. And, we just started going over that. I mean, I'll just sing a little bit for you because there's 2 counter melodies. And it's kind of conversational. We only really went over the first... No, we went over the whole thing. So it goes 1 verse, 2nd verse, then both of them together. I hear singing and there's no one there. I smell blossoms and the trees are bare. All day long I seem to walk on air. I wonder why. I keep tossing in my sleep at night. And what's more, I've lost my appetite. Stars that used to twinkle in the skies are twinkling in my eyes. I wonder why. That's the first kind of thing. And then the second is, you don't need analyzing. It is not so surprising that you feel very strange but nice. Your heart goes pitter-patter. I know just what's the matter. I changed the key. That's fine. Because I've been there once or twice. Put your head on my shoulder. You need someone who's older. I'll rub down with a velvet glove. There is nothing you can take to relieve that pleasant ache. You're not sick, you're just in love. And then they sing together about. Anyway, it's a lovely song, and it reminded me how much I like those old kind of Broadway numbers, and it's good stuff. It feels nostalgic and it feels familiar, and so it's cool. We noticed the rests, especially in that second verse. Do 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 do, ba-do boo boo ba-do boo, ba-do boo 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 boo, kind of a thing. So something that James was talking about was he encourages us to reconcile the work we do here, like in LAMDA with acting and all that, and and all of the analyses and work we put into that with music, because musicals are very easy targets for criticism because a lot of them suck. And he said there are only like really 20 musicals that are truly like really great. Like from the hundreds of musicals that exist, there's only like 20 that he can think of that are good all the way through. Like every song works, the story's good, the characters are good. I was fascinated by that because I felt that the same. And he has a theory that like singing, well, it was more why actors really stink at performing in musicals. And he thinks that singing lends itself to be like kind of false. Like, it kind of gets your head into it. And it's like, it creates this easy inclination for inauthenticity. But some of the musicals that he said were like good, kind of perfect musicals. I asked him afterwards, I was like what would you say are perfect musicals? Because the first one I thought of was Sweeney Todd. He's like, yeah, I'd say that's right. He's like, what else? I was like, I don't know. I was like, because I was trying to think of modern ones or something. I was like, I don't know, maybe Hadestown. He's like, maybe the old version before they finalized it. Then he said My Fair Lady, West Side Story. I'd probably put Sound of Music up there. But kind of like those older ones. And I asked him if he had more recent ones, and he said Parade, but before the revival, the original version. That's fascinating. Anyway, I think I agree with him for the most part. I thought Once next. I think Once is great. He said we should go see Amalie. It's great ensemble work and it's good. Yeah, he said that there's like reason why a lot of people criticize musicals, and that's a lot of the time the acting's just crap. Says don't be false. Singing has an energy that leads to that falseness. Play it honestly. It's more wholesome for the soul when you're honest. And music leads us to emote with our head and neck in such a way. You don't need and it's got this innate falseness of it. Anyway, so that was ensemble music. Then we had movement with Heriberto, and this class was delightfully frustrating. We talked, well, I don't have a ton of notes, but I do have a bit. We walked in the space, we sped up, and we stopped. Was that class? Yeah, it was. Good thing I didn't write everything down, but I remember this. Is we held hands with someone, and they went a direction, and then you weren't looking. Let me rephrase this. So you got in pairs, and then you held your partner's pair, and you didn't look at them, but you actively went into your own direction, and you're trying to see beyond the space, and you want to go towards that as far as you can because you'll get held back by your partner. And then they'll go and they'll move, and then you move, and it's all about like having a destination, going to it when you can't get all the way, right? And then eventually we let go of hands, and we just tried to keep the feeling of our partner in our mind. And it got difficult because like everybody's doing this, and he was like, push yourself, see how far you can go, and all of these things. And so my partner and I, we ran across the Collett House top studio, and it was cool kind of finding that direction and that purpose. Um, I don't know if this was probably before. I don't know if it was after. Yeah, I think it was before. But we did leaning. So I got with a partner, and we've done this before, where you hold their hips and then they lean forward. And my partner was feeling some hesitation with it. She was feeling kind of that lack of trust, not so much with me, but like with herself. So we didn't get too far. And then we leaned into it and walked, and then released and kept that resistance and power into walking. Then we also did a backwards lean, where one person was like this up against their back, and then you let your partner lean back into it. And you really wanted to pivot like at the ankles, not at the knees or the hips, but really kind of stay straight and trust yourself, which was always fun. We also did this exercise of a haunted house. And so we imagined that we were walking through a haunted house, and what did we see and where did we go? And he gave us some prompts and some things throughout. And he's like, oh, are there any secret passages? Is it dusty? What does it smell like? What does it look like? And then he was kind of walking us through as we were creating these spaces for ourselves. And then he said, and then you hear a sound. And you're not scared, but you're interested in where that sound is. And so you start looking for the sound, and there it is again. And it's upstairs, so you gotta go up the stairs. And then you find yourself in a long hallway, and on the other side of the hallway there's an orb of light. It doesn't have a figure, but you're curious and you're interested in it. And you start walking, towards it. And you feel, and then once you get up to it, you feel the need to reach your hand out and put your hand through it. And once you do, it disappears. And then you have the urge to leave the house. You have to leave. And so we all ran out. It was fun, kind of establishing that that space and exploring it and having fun. Then we debriefed a little bit, talked about it. Then we talked about how inside of us we all have trillions and billions of ideas and choices, right? Like just ways to say goodbye, for example. And we talked about how many ways could somebody say goodbye, like just with a gesture. And so we played with that a little bit. We talked about how many could you do. And he's like, could you do 10, 20, 30? I think I said I could do 50. He's like, oh, 50, that's good, okay. And then so we had some time practicing and just doing that. And then afterwards he asked, he's like, how many did you do? And I was like, I didn't really count, but I don't know, probably 30 or something. He's like, could you do more? And then I told him I could do 101. So he's like, okay, show the class, do it. And so I jumped around and I did a bunch. I think I got like 37 or something, 40. I don't know. I wasn't counting. Someone else was. But what he wanted is that moment where you run out of immediate ideas. And what does your body come up with afterwards? And just like that one inspiration can lead to a bunch more options. You know, there's always so much in there. Yeah, that was cool. And then here comes the frustrating part. We ended with an activity. And that activity was to say goodbye to a dear friend on a dock. And so he put some tape, like if what you're looking at is a bird's eye view, he put some tape here, then you walk, come down, put some tape here. So 2 pieces of tape to show this right angle, kind of L-shaped dock. And he said that this dear friend said the boat leaves. They're leaving on a boat. It leaves at 9, and you get there right at 9. But it left early, and so by the time you get there, it's already halfway between you and the horizon at the end of the dock. So this is what Ari wanted to see. He wanted to see the space and the most economical and efficient gesture of goodbye, right? And what he means by economical is minimum effort, maximum reward. And so one student started out and was really excited to go, and it was beautiful. I cried. It was it was just this idea, and this guy's wife and kids had just gotten back from being in the States, and so he was using that, and it was just like, I want to do it, and it was beautiful, and I've been missing Emma, so it was great. And afterwards he was like, that was beautiful, that was wonderful, but so emotional, because he didn't want emotion. That's what he said. He didn't want character, he didn't want conflict, he didn't want themes, and he didn't want emotion. And so though what this student had done was beautiful and great, if he was trying to tell a story, it wasn't the assignment. And he like pantomimed a backpack and was like waving it. He's like, "Hey, goodbye." And he looked and he waited, and then he saw her. He was like, and they started walking back and looked a little more, And it was this great story, but it wasn't what we were going for. Yeah, I wrote a few things before this, but one of the things that Ari mentioned at the beginning is that this work itself is rigorous and requires a lot. It requires effort, so it's not him, it's the work that demands it. And then, how much do you add to something before it breaks and becomes an adaptation, right? He was saying that, like, with his assignments, like, do what I ask, because I don't remember what else he was talking about, but the idea that like you could do an adaptation of Shakespeare, let's say, like this is, or no, you could do an interpretation of Shakespeare, but how much can you change before it becomes inspired by instead of what did I just say? Not adaptation. That's the other one. Interpretation. Like, how much can you add to your interpretation before it becomes an adaptation? And that's fascinating because it's so many things like that. I feel like there's all these fans of movies and shows and characters and things that keep getting upset because it's not the way that they imagined it, or it's not the way it's been portrayed. And so at what point should you just make a different thing, Like, if you're going to change everything about it, why not create your own version of it? You know what I mean? Hopefully that makes sense. Like Snow White, for example. Snow White is about a character whose hair is black as raven, whose skin is white as snow, and whose lips are red as roses, something like that, maybe blood. And then she falls in love with this prince, but then gets poisoned by the queen, and then they kiss. The prince saves her, right? And how much can you strip away from that before it's no longer Snow White, And Disney seemed to push those. I haven't actually seen it, so I don't know, but Disney seemed to really push those feelings. Okay, yeah. And then we always want to hear voice, right? So yeah, so Eddie was saying that this first student's wasn't economical, and that wasn't the assignment, tried again, and still had character, and he was like, oh, but it's like still emotional. But he was like, but I didn't show any emotion in my face. It's like, oh, emotion is in the body, right? Like, even lifting onto your toes shows emotion. So this thing became quite difficult. He said, Eddie said, I want the verb, no opinion on it. Because the body talks all the time, strip that down. emotions are not in the face. Don't. Yeah. And then someone else went, and they were like determined to go and to do this a certain way. And they went walk, 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 walk. Bye. And then walked off. And he was like, wow, that's so emotional. You really hated that person or didn't care. You also say don't drop your gestures, which is something I do all the time because that's just so like unnatural and conveying of something. And it also makes you much more likely to drop at the end of the line if you drop your gesture. Also, if you don't breathe, the audience won't breathe. It's a respiratory agreement between audience and actor. I thought that was cool. We also talked about acting as beautiful craft. It's like magic. You can transform into the character. And then he said, and there has to be a realization. You know, you get there, you see that the boat isn't there. And I was trying to figure this out. Another student went after. Were there only 3? I think there were only 3. Yeah. It's so fascinating to see how you can portray the verb and the action without opinion about it and without character, without emotion. And so I think you just got to break it down into beats, right? You're on time. You look. You don't see the boat. Nope, see, that was confusion. That was emotion. You see the boat on the horizon. You go to the end of the dock. You say goodbye. Goodbye. Then you walk back. Did you finish your task? I guess. I don't know. I'm fascinated to see. One of the students who was fighting with this, they asked if Eddie would demonstrate it for us at the end, and he said, no, I want you to find it yourself. And it's interesting. And it's funny because Eddie at the beginning of the class said, this class may give you a headache. I don't think he was wrong. Okay, then we had lunch, then we had booths. So one student started by saying goodbye to his brother. And he sang a song, and it was for him to have this thing that he could play and repeat. And this student's been struggling with kind of authenticity and vulnerability, and so this was really it. And it's hard to distinguish ourselves from the character when we get vulnerable, and so it's important to find those processes that help us. And then the question that Ollie asked was like, what's the obstacle for this character? What makes this difficult? Or what is the obstacle to achieving the goal of saying goodbye or whatever it may be? Then another student went, and they had the 10-word prompt, which is always fun and fascinating. And their 10 words were, I miss you. Who's going to walk me down the aisle? Which was great because it helps you play with all of this. What am I going to say? And all this. Yeah. And so there's so much that's done and expressed. And she cried, and she's brilliant. And you saw the turmoil and the thing. And when talked about it, she was talking about, you know, there's so much that you could say, but at what point is there a thought that you can't not say? Which was a cool idea of how to approach the 10 words. Then the next person went, and this one was dark and definitely uncomfortable for people. But it was, the gist was I don't know if it's a politician or a business person or someone, but confessing to having abused children, like sexually abusing children, and like confessing to his wife that he's going to get arrested and everything is going to fall apart. And so it was interesting as we talked about this because he said that as an actor, he was uncomfortable with the things that he was saying. And it's our job as actors to represent the world. So we must still not judge the material or the character. We need the conflict to be the characters, not the actors, which was interesting because we could play horrible, horrible people. That's strong. Well, that's judgmental. We don't want to be judgmental. We could play characters who do horrible, horrible things. But it's like Bryan Cranston said, we're all capable of everything. Every person. Like, I could kill someone. I don't think I ever will. I'm not planning on it. But people are emotional and flawed and instinctual, and sometimes we just respond, and it's not so much a matter of if we could or couldn't do something, but it's a matter of what are the circumstances required for us to do something. And then this honors all of us in the world to play these characters with sensitivity and commitment, which is cool. Then the next person went, and there's they were playing Charles's father, apologizing and connecting with the other son's father. They're like a headmaster or something. It was like apologizing for their son. And I don't know. It was vague and interesting. Like, it wasn't spelled out exactly. And this student was a woman too, so playing a man was interesting, and it was different than everything she's done before. But the question asked is like, what makes a grounded person break? What like what I was saying before, how every person has a breaking point in which they would or could do anything. Like, when a grounded person breaks into emotion, like, what gets them to that point? Yeah. Then Johannes did one, which was a married man. Like, he had been at the club with a friend from college or something, and he was married to a woman, and they had like a gay fling, and the friend tried to kiss him at this bar or whatever it was, because their song came on. And so he's writing to this friend that he can't talk to them, and it was layered with self-hatred and homophobia, and it was interesting. It was like and he wished he had given a sort of trigger warning, or just like a advisory before starting, because it was some uncomfortable themes, right? And there's something like in letting us sit unconsciously in like the percolation. That's a great word. No wonder I wrote it down. I don't know what it means exactly. Because he didn't like work. That's not the right word. He didn't do a ton of specific work in writing this down or anything, or overly doing it. But Ollie said how there is something in just letting your brain percolate about it unconsciously. And then sometimes you have to go on stage even when you're not comfortable and you're not ready. And so what tools can we use? Then another student went, did it in Spanish, her native tongue. And it was about reaching out to her bio kid that had been adopted, that she'd given up for adoption and had no contact with. And yeah, and it was cool. I liked understanding. Felt like I always like listening in Spanish because I feel like I'm in on the club or whatever. And then something they talked about that just came up was that don't memorize to the end of a line, memorize to the end of the thought, which is so smart because that really helps clarify things. And then another student went, and they were telling telling his brother or that he's fired because he's like a drug addict and is like on a bender, is gone, and he's like, you can't work on this project anymore. And part of his prompt was to not touch his face, because that's something that he does, because it's a very like natural thing and it helps him get into the character. I do similar things, you know. I'm a little twitchy myself, like Lawrence said about Andrew Scott, because I really admire the naturalism of Andrew Scott and just like doing stuff that you wouldn't normally like want to do. I think of like being a choir concert, and it's like, don't scratch my nose, don't scratch my nose, kind of a thing, because that draws attention to yourself. But like in real life, we would be having a conversation and like I touch my hair or my face or whatever. But yeah, I wrote down the question, what is me and what is the thing I'm trying to play? I think that's talking about the difference between playing a character. Unsure. But another student went, and they were telling someone, an ex-wife. She was telling her ex-wife that they got their daughter like the same Elsa dress, and the student's character knew the exact right thing that she wanted. It was a specific dress, and then her ex-wife bought it for the kid first, and so it was Christmas and they had the same present, and the ex-wife gave hers first, and it's like, why would you do that? And then I think her prompt was to eviscerate her, and she felt like she didn't quite get there, and it was interesting to see the disappointment and frustration when you don't get there, you know. And then another student went and they spoke in Mandarin, which is so fun. And it was based on a real person in her life. I asked her afterwards, and it was someone who had abandoned their child with an abusive husband, or the child's father. And then, because she just didn't have the means to do to like take her with her, so then now she has the means, and so she's like reaching out, and it was cool. She talked about how every time she rehearsed it, she cried, but she didn't cry this time, which was just interesting and maybe a little disappointing, you know. But the goal is it should never be the emotion, it should be the objective, achieving it or not, right? And then I went, and I had been sitting on this prompt for 3 weeks, because I got it before I left for the US of A. And my prompt was to blackmail someone close to me. And so my prompt was to, my character was someone who was in the middle of a messy divorce, and so he was like a high-powered business person, and he cheated on someone. He cheated on his wife with like a secretary or something, and so she wanted a divorce, and so he's blackmailing her to give him full custody of the children, because she is unstable and she's emotional and she can't take care of herself when he was providing for her. So how is she going to take care of herself and kids when she has to do it herself, you know, kind of a thing. And he got some good feedback and stuff. I wasn't happy with it forever. I struggle with booths, because I don't ever feel like I get it well. But it was very kind of still and purposeful, and he liked that, and Ollie said it was different than anything else I've done, and then said, I want to continue exploring this, so I want the next one to be you're like a 40-year-old man, and you have that similar stillness and purpose, but a new character, and you've come to ask why. So that's what I'll be working on next. I don't know what I want to do yet. And on the slightest chance that someone in my cohort is watching this, before I do it, I won't say. just so you can be surprised. Then another student went, and they were like a southern, like Western cowboy kind of person who had helped this guy out and had taken him in, and then he started like dating his daughter, this man, this character's daughter, and so he is like kicking her out, and no, kicking him out. He's talking to the man he helped come into his life, and he's like, no, you're, after everything I did for you, kind of thing. And it was fun. They had like the belt buckle, they had this big belt and kind of this overcoat. It's like, what do you think you're doing? It's like, I took you in, I did all this stuff, and it was good. I liked it. And some questions came up like, what does masculinity mean in a person? And what is the mask, and when does it drop, or where does it drop? And the prompt was apparently to say like, how dare you? And they never said it actually, and so I like called that. It's like, well, you never actually like said the prompt. And they're like, I know, I thought about that. You said, what does it mean? So I had it mean that without actually saying it. Yeah, and it was interesting too, because we started talking about how people in extreme situations use extreme like Jacobean language, you know, and we talk about how Shakespeare seems to be not honest or weird or whatever, but it's kind of very natural for us to use this elevated high speech, which is cool. Then another student went, and they had the 10 words challenge. Yeah. And their words were, stop talking to me, find a better friend, you're boring. Apparently this student had the same prompt. Oh no. Are they having the same prompt next time? Or was this the second time with the prompt? I'm not sure. But it was the idea that they were like at a nursing home care facility, and this one person, they would always have to take care of them. And so, but the person's annoying and it's hard, so he's saying like, stop working with me and talking to me and stuff. I'm done, basically. But it's really rough because that's a hard thing to do. So it was fun. He really liked his world building. He kind of like opened a basement, like kind of garage door, and then climbed in and did the whole thing. And then the next student was great. It was a bridesmaid at like a best friend's wedding, congratulating them. And the way they entered was brilliant. They had like this cup. It's like a little cup. And as she was like getting her things together, putting stuff down, she just like put the cup in her mouth and like did it. And I was like, that's so real. I love that. Just a great little thing. I wrote down that there is something different from the temperature change of your character and how they're different in and out of the booth. Oh, yeah. So I guess just kind of like that mask idea again, you know, they put on the mask, but what is the difference between your character in and out of the booth? And then the last student came, and he had the 10 words as well. And it said, it's time. Come say goodbye. Now. She's our daughter. Please. And the idea was that I think his daughter had leukemia or some cancer, and she was going to die. And so it was a message to his wife to come say goodbye. And he really liked this idea of having the character be all cried out. And so he spent the whole class just like crying and getting himself to that over emotional state for the whole 2-hour class. And Ollie said, you don't have to do it for 2 hours. It's only 2 minutes. And so it's the idea of how do you get yourself in and out of a character, right? And how do you do that efficiently, economically, as Heriberto would say. Yeah. Then we had voice with Tamsin. Yeah, we were in the Sainsbury Theater, which was fun. It's the first time we've been in there. And we discussed what we were going to do in a circle, as we do. We warmed up by like rubbing our body and walking the space and really taking notice of what was around us. Then we all got on one end of the theater and we paired up with different people. And then we walked downstage, breathing out as we walked, took in the space, breathed it in, and then separated. So we would go walk, kind of a thing. And then we did that 2 more times. Then we did some floor work, which put me to sleep, as it tends to do. But it was really the idea of focusing on breath and sending, and sending those feelings different places. It's going to rain again today. It's been so rainy. Then we really focused on expanding our ribs, and we held our ribs here and felt the expansion like out this way and out that way. And then we partnered up with somebody and felt their ribs. And then we were buzzing bees, and so we took in a breath. And then we went walked all around the space, and then came back to the partner, recharged with a breath, and then we did a vocalize with a zzz, bzz, and see and saw if that was any different, and we kind of discussed that. And it was chill day. And then I've been out of it this past week, and so there's like people are hanging out after school, and so there's never a point to go home and then come back because that's 2 hours. So I just kind of stayed in the Sainsbury Theater for like an hour and a half, just scrolling on my phone. It was kind of bad, but I'm gonna do better this week, and I'm planning on being happy and healthy and wonderful. Anyway, that was my day. Bit tired. I need a haircut, but all is well. And that's the gist of what we accomplished, and I'm almost done with my second journal. Love you guys. Have a great life, day, time.